Is the way you are thinking about depression wrong? Have you been taught that it's a chemical imbalance, that it's genetic, that it's, from your environment or the choices that you're making, or maybe nutritional deficits, right? There's so many people talking about depression. And if you just do this, you won't be depressed. I have personally struggled with depression. And the most severe time was 11 months after my daughter Maya died. The grief of the suddenness and the pain of losing my third child brought me into a depth that I actually thought it might be better to not be here on this earth. I understand that pain, but I also know that depression is a complicated word. It's not just a chemical imbalance. It's not just the grief that I was experiencing. And it's definitely not just, what I'm eating or putting in my body and things like that. It is multifactual. There's lots of components to it. And honestly, each and every one of us has experienced the feeling of depression. But clinical depression that we call, or major depressive disorder, which is taught as a chemical imbalance, brings that same feeling of depression to unimaginable chaos and sadness in your brain. And so how do we understand this continuum of everybody experiences depression to, having major depressive disorder and feeling like you want to hurt yourself? That is, it's a continuum. And definitely if you are at the point where you feel like you want to hurt yourself, then you should be seeking professional help. But as you think about depression as a continuum, that we've all felt it, how do we know, what is a chemical imbalance? What is the choices that I'm making? What is, just that I'm experiencing intense grief? My name is Dr. B. I am a psychiatric nurse practitioner with 25 years of clinical experience, and I've lost 3 children, 1 to a drowning accident, 2 to a rare neurodegenerative condition, and I lost my husband to that same neurological condition. So I understand depression from a professional clinical standpoint and from actually experiencing it. What I have learned, and through my own experience, is that if you can take how you're feeling and learn to think through it, organize the different components, and make choices in line with being the best version of yourself, you can uniquely help your depression. I often teach that you are responsible for your mental health journey. And if you need professional help, those are choices that you make. But I want you to think of, what do I need? What is my depression? So in the Mentally Strong method that I teach, we start with a thought. And here we're talking about depression. And so I would put depression in the middle circle, and then I would ask myself, what is making me sad or depressed right now? And right now in my life, things are going okay. So, I would be putting not too much there, maybe some little things that make me sad. But oftentimes when someone feels depressed, they're only focusing on what is making them depressed right then and trying to fix that. But our mental health goes all the way back to our childhood, right? There are cycles. There is cumulative grief and trauma that we show up in this world with. And so the next question that we always ask is, what made you depressed in the past? And as you can imagine, losing 3 children and my husband, there's multiple times in my life where I felt depressed. Obviously, the days in which they died, but I remember distinctly on the phone with the doctor the day they gave me the diagnosis of my son. I remember distinctly the day that we were in the ICU and they were telling me that he was probably going to die. Right? There were multiple times that depression hit me intensely. And so I would put all those things in little bubbles and begin to see the cycles. Then I asked myself, what made me feel depressed in my past? And in my childhood, I'm sorry. And for some people, they'll be like, I never was depressed in my childhood. And that's okay. You can leave that area blank. But for me, I remember being sad, probably not clinically depressed, or, I didn't know it was depression. But I can remember distinct times in my life as a child feeling really sad. And so I would write those things down. And then I ask myself, how does this impact my spiritual relationship? And for me, it's like I'm not good enough. Like if I had a better relationship with my God, and I did better as a person, then blessings would pour out on me, and I wouldn't have these hardships happen, and I wouldn't feel depressed. So that's my story, and that's how I would kind of map that out. But then I would sit and look at that map and look for patterns of when depression comes up for me. Now, I do want to stop here for a moment and let you know that I have done antidepressant therapy a couple times in my life. And so I'm not saying that this, doing a thought map and learning to think efficiently through your problems does not include getting treatment for the depression. Okay? This is about, can I understand my cycles so that I can improve those things? And for me, depression comes when I'm working really hard for something. I'm believing, I'm praying, I'm trying to manifest, and it doesn't happen. And that even goes back to childhood. I didn't really understand prayer and manifestation at that time in my life, but it's when I just felt like life wasn't fair, like something wasn't going my way, and not in a spoiled tantrum kind of way, in a I need love and connection type of way. So that's what we do. We go through this thought map of, how do I efficiently think through my problems? Because if you just think about your problems, you might be ruminating. Ruminating is when you think over and over and over again, and you actually make those memories and those negative thoughts kind of dig deep into your neurological system. I'd love for you to download the worksheet in the description. And this is my Think, Organize, Choose worksheet. And it has the 10 categories in there, because the next step is learning how to organize all of those things, right? I talked about, things not being fair, injustices. I have anxiety about performance and doing the right thing, making the right decisions. I have negative talk, right? I said, that I'm not good enough. I obviously have grief, and I have trauma. And if you don't like that word trauma, change it to injury, because we all have injury. We all have things that have happened in our life that create an injury, a change in perception, a negative thought, a negative belief system. And so acknowledging that because those things need to be released. So when we take the time to organize these thoughts, we put them into these 10 categories that are on the worksheet, because in each of those categories, you do something different. And, if you read lots of self-development books, and, it almost feels like if you just think positive, all these positive things will happen. And there's some truth to that. There is more of a 60-40 truth to that. If you are focusing on positive, you're thinking positive, you're looking for positive, more positive things will happen. But it does not mean negative things or bad things won't happen, right? And so we absolutely should be trying to think positive, be in gratitude, but that is only going to help our negative self-talk. It's not going to help your grief. If someone were to say to me after losing 3 children and my husband, just think positive. The pain of that type of grief doesn't go away, right? We can learn to grow around it, but it doesn't go away. And so that pain I get to feel. But if it is enmeshed with the trauma, and losing a child is trauma by itself, but oftentimes we enmesh our grief and our trauma and our negative talk, right? If you have this negative dialogue going on in your head that you're not enough, but it's actually based on a series of traumatic things that have happened to you, those things are actually enmeshed. So it's like when you try to think positive, it's like you have to, for every negative thought you have to have 10 or so positive thoughts, right? And so you feel like you're just constantly working, when if we could release the trauma, the positive, and change the positive thoughts, then it becomes, our new self, right? And our better self as we move forward through that. So as you can see in the worksheet, there are 10 different categories. I teach about all of them in different ways, but it's about being able to organize those thoughts. Because if you go back and you look at your thought map and you see all these bubbles and all these negative things, those are things that we need to organize in our brain so that we can choose. So many people say, well, depression is a choice. I've heard this, from self-development gurus, from, church type people that will tell you it's just a choice. Happiness is a choice. Joy is a choice. Gratitude is a choice. Although those statements are partially true, right? They only help your negative talk, right? If I say today, I am going to choose joy. I am going to choose joy, and I make that my statement for the day. I'm going to find more joy, and that is a positive statement. It is helping my negative thoughts. But I also need to take the time to feel the pain of grief. If we just try to suppress these things and just try to live in positivity and gratitude, it is a lot of mental work. Have you ever sat there and just thought, it's too much work to try to think positive? And so we go to what we call the default mode network, and we feel sorry for ourselves. We don't want to get to bed. We spend our Saturday moping around, right? That is kind of because you're fighting so hard to be positive instead of organizing. And then we can make choices. So for grief, we're going to choose to honor that grief and honor that pain. Trauma, we're going to, identify it, process it, release it. Negative self-talk, we are going to try to think positive. So learning to organize so that the choices make more sense. We're not fighting against ourselves. So the Mentally Strong Method is about learning to be your own mental health advocate. I'd love for you to keep watching and learn more about me.